It's that time again, folks. A time when we take a break from the now socially unacceptable sadism of today and look to the past. A time when sadism wasn't always frowned upon and in fact was celebrated in one particular type of person's resume.
The executioner.
Today we look at the pleasure a murderer takes in their craft and we're horrified, and rightly so. Our sensibilities have become far more sophisticated over the centuries, but, back in the day, there was nothing wrong with the ambiance and the sounds of bones a-cracking, flesh a-tearing, and screams echoing through the halls of a good old-fashioned torture chamber. In today's episode, you'll need to have your sea legs, otherwise you might get a little bit sick, because we're talking about Scaphism, or the boats.
Oh my goodness!
Although the nautical nature of this subject is not the only thing that might make you ill, because once we get into the gruesome details of what the boats actually entail, you might have a hard time, even though, upon initial inspection, it really doesn't sound that bad. But upon further investigation, you'll be glad that we're no longer ruled by fickle kings that might decide to do something like this to you at the drop of a hat. Prepare yourself, because Scaphism is a wild way to end somebody, and learning about it is guaranteed to be just as wild of a ride. But before we get into any of that, I just want to say welcome back to the Walk in the Dark show. As always, I'm your host, Justin, and thank you for watching. And while we're on the subject of irritated and short-tempered kings, that's actually how this topic begins. And forgive me if I butcher these names. Plutarch's work, The Life of Artaxerxes, tells the story of a soldier named Plutarch. This is said to be the first historical record of this method of execution. Now, the aforementioned soldier had dishonored the king by claiming to have killed his younger brother, Cyrus. And you did hear that correctly. Artaxerxes was upset that this soldier was claiming to have killed his younger brother. He was not upset that he did that. If you're not familiar with this account, that's probably pretty confusing. But Cyrus, to say the least, was a bit of a rambunctious younger brother. The kind that tries to delegitimize his older brother's reign and, raise up a militia to tear him off of his throne. Not the best. Due to Cyrus's opinion and ambitions, a bloody battle ensued called the Battle of Cunaxa in 401 BCE. It was during this battle that Cyrus charged after Xerxes and was subsequently eliminated, but not by Xerxes, by a javelin. And it's Plutarch's account that states that the finishing blow was delivered by our soldier of an unfortunate fate, Mithridates. So, great! Mithridates eliminates the problem, the battle is over, and Xerxes holds on to his throne. I don't see the issue here. Well, the issue was, like many kings, Xerxes was a bit petty, and it wasn't enough for him to have led this victorious battle. He had to be the one that delivered that victorious blow, which he was not, but he wanted all the land to believe that he was, according to some reports. Allegedly, in case Xerxes comes back from the grave and tries to sue me. But Mithridates was also kind of petty, and so he just could not keep his mouth shut. He just had to brag about it, He just, he couldn't leave well enough alone, you see? I'm sorry, that was awful. But you get the point. And he proceeded to do the unthinkable. Take credit for the thing that he did in fact do. And this, of course, made the king out to be what he in fact was, a liar. A great big phony, if you will. And so, of course, as any good king would, he needed to punish this individual that had stopped a massive rebellion and proceeded to tell the truth about it. That logic definitely tracks. And the punishment for this crime? Well, this account from the Life of Artaxerxes tells us what happened next. The king decreed that Mithridates should be put to death in boats, which execution is after the following manner. Taking 2 boats framed exactly to fit and answer each other, they lie down in one of them, the malefactor that suffers, upon his back, then, covering it with the other, and so setting them together that the head, hands, and feet of him are left outside, and the rest of his body lies shut up within, then forcing him to ingest a mixture of milk and honey before pouring all over his face and body. They then keep his face continually turned towards the sun, and it becomes completely covered up and hidden by the multitude of flies that settle on it. And as within the boats he does what those that eat and drink must needs do, creeping things and vermin spring out of the corruption and rottenness of the excrement, and these entering into the bowels of him, his body is consumed. When the man is manifestly dead, the uppermost boat being taken off, they find his flesh devoured, and swarms of such noisome creatures preying upon and, as it were, growing to his inwards. In this way Mithridates, after suffering for 17 days, at last expired. Alright, so that language and the way that that account was portrayed is a little bit dated, so let me put this in modern terms. If an individual were to be subject to the boats or Scaphism, they would be placed in a body-sized boat. Then another boat would be placed on top, creating sort of a shell-like structure where the person's arms and legs would be coming out, and of course their head, but the rest of their body would be encased in this boat shell. The executioners would then force-feed this individual with milk and honey, and slather their face and their body with the same, which is why I said earlier that this, upon initial investigation, doesn't seem that bad, but when you look a little more into it, it's pretty bad. The reason this first impression can be quite deceiving is because, as we know, milk and honey is pretty rich, and could easily cause nausea. But more importantly, as this account states, what goes into the body must also come out. So your entire body, minus your extremities and your head, would be encased in what would become essentially a septic tank. And so as your skin and face are baking in the hot sun and all of that milk is curdling on you and in you, the biohazard that you would actively become would attract all sorts of lovely critters that just can't wait to consume you from the inside out. Now, one would assume that because the method of execution is boats, that they would be out on the water, but it's actually more likely that the boats were out in the forest somewhere or in the sand, on land essentially, which would of course allow the full force of nature to run its course. And according to the account that we just read, by the time this soldier was found, he had been thoroughly consumed from the inside out, and what we can only assume to have been maggots were growing inside of him. It's just lovely. Now that's horrific, but the thing is, Mithridates didn't just suffer for 3 hours, 3 days, or even a week. No, according to this account, he was in this state for 17 days. "17 days essentially rotting and being eaten alive in your own filth before you finally pass on to the next life." Now, okay, there are many cruel execution and torture methods that we see throughout all of history, many of which challenge the imaginations of modern man. I can't even begin to fathom the terror and agony of being drawn and quartered or skinned alive. Particularly with being drawn and quartered, the thought that I could look down and see my own intestines being pulled out just really makes me squirm. But these methods last hours, sometimes days. If you're super unfortunate, maybe close to a week, but not 17 days. And that's what sets Scaphism apart, frankly, in a league of its own. among its competition is the absurd longevity of it. Now, the historical validity of this account is very much called into question. The historian that wrote down this account is notorious for exaggerating and giving, let's say, unique additions to certain established stories and historical accounts that already exist. And though there are some other fictional writings that talk about this method of execution, some of Shakespeare's writings talk about this, for example, as far as real historical accounts, there's little to no evidence that this ever happened to anybody. Some of the more morbid members of my community might hope that this was a method that was used, but I, for one, breathed a sigh of relief when I received this information. And I truly hope that Scaphism, the boats, really is just the stuff of legends. But if not, I don't know that I'll ever look at another jar of honey the same, and I might think twice before I plop that into my tea. Thank you for watching, my friends, and if you enjoyed this, go ahead and leave it a like and comment, and if you would like to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. I cover a lot of topics like this, of the dark historical variety, but I also cover a lot of true crime. True crime's really more of the bread and butter of this channel. Till then, again, I'm your host, Justin, and remember, you can take a walk in the dark, but always live in the light. God bless.